Women who appear younger. Master. Rare emotional habits. Immanuel Kant. Have you ever wondered why some people seem to radiate a youthful presence that transcends physical appearance, carrying themselves with a lightness of being that eludes most of us? It's a question that often surfaces in quiet moments of self-reflection, when we catch ourselves trapped in cycles of reaction rather than thoughtful response. Most of us struggle to understand the profound connection between our emotional habits and the quality of our existence, feeling overwhelmed by life's complexities without a philosophical framework to guide us. The wisdom contained in Kant's understanding of human cognition and ethics often seems locked behind impenetrable academic language and abstract concepts, creating a barrier between these transformative insights and their practical application in your daily experience. Perhaps you've felt that familiar twinge of inadequacy when attempting to bridge this gap, that sense that something essential remains just beyond your grasp, leaving you with fragmented understanding rather than integrated wisdom. By the end of our journey today, however, you will possess a clear, applicable understanding of how Kantian principles illuminate the relationship between emotional discipline and our experience of time, aging, and vitality. This knowledge won't merely expand your intellectual horizons, but will fundamentally transform how you perceive your emotional habits and their profound influence on your lived experience. Understanding these concepts, now, today, can immediately begin to shift the quality of your awareness and the intentionality with which you approach your emotional responses. So, let us embark together on this exploration of Kant's wisdom and discover how it reveals the secrets of those who maintain youthful vibrancy through rare emotional mastery. The phenomenon we observe in those who appear younger than their chronological age invites us to venture beyond superficial explanations and into the territory of Kant's epistemology, the study of how we know what we know. Kant proposed that human experience is shaped not merely by external reality, but by the structures of our own minds. He distinguished between noumena, things as they exist in themselves independently of our perception, and phenomena, things as they appear to us through the lens of our cognitive faculties. This distinction revolutionized philosophy by suggesting that we do not passively receive the world, but actively construct our experience of it through certain innate categories of understanding. When we observe someone who appears youthful beyond their years, we are witnessing not just a physical reality, but a phenomenon shaped by our perception, one that reveals something profound about the relationship between emotional habits and our experience of time. Those rare individuals who master certain emotional habits embody a different relationship with temporality itself, one that aligns with Kant's insights about how our minds structure our experience of reality. Their apparent youthfulness is not merely a biological curiosity, but a manifestation of how certain ways of being can transform our relationship with time and aging. I want to pause here and ask you directly, how many times have you found yourself trapped in emotional reactions that seem to age you from within, creating tension and heaviness that become etched in your expression and posture? That sense that something essential about Kant's understanding of human freedom and emotional discipline remains elusive, just beyond your grasp. You're not alone. Many of us carry this quiet yearning to understand how our inner emotional landscape shapes our outer expression and experience of time. I'd love for you to share your experience in the comments. Something as simple as, "My biggest challenge with emotional mastery is..." Your comment not only helps me create content that addresses your real needs, but it also creates a community where others who might be facing the same obstacles can feel understood and less alone in their philosophical journey. It's through this sincere exchange that we grow together. So please, pause the video for a moment and share your experience. Your voice matters more than you might imagine. Kant's conception of the categorical imperative offers profound insight into how our emotional habits can either constrain or liberate us. The categorical imperative states that we should act only according to that maxim, whereby you can, at the same time, will that it should become a universal law. This principle challenges us to consider whether our emotional reactions would serve humanity if everyone responded in the same way. Those who appear consistently youthful often embody this universal perspective in their emotional responses, reacting not from mere personal preference or momentary impulse, but from principles that could benefit all of humanity if universally adopted. This transcendent perspective liberates them from the burden of emotional reactivity that characterizes most human experience. Consider how differently you might respond to daily frustrations if you first asked yourself, "Would I want everyone in the world to respond this way in similar circumstances?" This simple yet profound shift in perspective can release us from patterns of reactivity that accelerate the aging process both internally and in our outward appearance. The furrows of worry and lines of anger that become etched in our faces over time are not merely the result of the passing years, but of thousands of instances of emotional contraction that, when viewed through Kant's framework, fail the test of universalizability. Kant's distinction between heteronomy and autonomy further illuminates why certain emotional habits contribute to appearing younger. Heteronomy refers to acting according to desires and impulses that originate outside our rational will, essentially being controlled by our reactions to external circumstances or internal unconscious drives. Autonomy, in contrast, is the state of self-governance according to principles that we ourselves have determined to be rational and good. Those who master rare emotional habits exhibit true Kantian autonomy. They choose their emotional responses rather than being driven by them. This self-governance manifests physically over time. The face that has spent decades in states of worry, anger, and resentment will inevitably reflect those emotional contractions, while the countenance that embodies autonomy, rather than reactivity, retains a lightness and openness that we perceive as youthful. This is not superficial aesthetics, but the outward manifestation of an inward philosophical orientation that aligns with Kant's vision of human freedom. The autonomous individual experiences emotions fully, but is not controlled by them, maintaining what Kant might call a kingdom of ends within themselves, where each emotional response serves their highest values rather than undermining them. The concept of timelessness in those who appear younger also connects to Kant's transcendental idealism, his revolutionary claim that space and time are not features of the external world, but forms of intuition that the mind imposes on our experience. According to Kant, time is not an objective reality that exists independent of our perception, but rather a subjective condition that shapes how we experience the world. This insight helps explain how certain individuals seem to transcend the conventional experience of aging. By mastering rare emotional habits that align with transcendental rather than merely empirical awareness, they relate differently to the very experience of time itself. Their emotional discipline reflects an implicit understanding that their relationship with temporality is partly their own creation, rather than simply an external force acting upon them. When we observe someone who appears remarkably youthful, we are witnessing the physical manifestation of a different relationship with time, one that embodies Kant's insight that time is partly constructed by the perceiving mind rather than existing wholly independent of it. Kant's concept of aesthetic ideas further illuminates the phenomenon we're exploring. He described aesthetic ideas as representations of the imagination that evoke much thought without being reducible to any specific concept. The person who appears youthful through emotional mastery embodies an aesthetic idea, presenting us with a living representation that suggests possibilities beyond our conceptual understanding of aging and time. Their presence evokes in us a sense of what Kant called the supersensible, that which transcends ordinary experience and points toward a higher realm of meaning. The rare emotional habits they've mastered create an outward harmony that speaks to something beyond mere physical maintenance, suggesting instead a profound inner alignment with universal principles. This alignment creates a certain grace that we perceive as youthfulness, though what we're really responding to is the harmony between their inner and outer states, a harmony that Kant would recognize as reflecting the unity of the sensible and supersensible realms of human experience. The noticeable difference in those who appear younger through emotional mastery is their relationship with what Kant termed the kingdom of ends, his vision of a moral community in which each person is treated as an end in themselves, never merely as a means to someone else's ends. People who master rare emotional habits tend to extend this principle to their relationship with themselves. They refuse to sacrifice their emotional well-being for momentary gratification, understanding intuitively what Kant articulated philosophically, that true freedom comes not from indulging every impulse, but from governing ourselves, according to principles that honor our inherent dignity and worth. This self-respect manifests physically in how they carry themselves. In the absence of the desperate energy that characterizes those who continuously violate their own boundaries and values in pursuit of external validation. The calm confidence that comes from treating oneself as an end rather than a means radiates outward as a quality we perceive as youthful vitality, though it is in fact something far more profound. It is the visible expression of internal philosophical alignment with the categorical imperative. Kant's distinction between phenomena and noumena also helps us understand why conventional approaches to appearing younger often fail. Most anti-aging strategies focus exclusively on phenomena, on appearances, attempting to manipulate the surface without addressing the deeper reality. But Kant would remind us that what we perceive is already filtered through the structures of our cognition. Those who truly appear younger have intuited something profound, that by addressing the noumenal aspects of their being, the inner reality of their emotional habits and relationship with their own existence, they transform how they appear to others from the inside out. This is not about denying the physical reality of aging, but about recognizing that our perception of age is not simply a matter of empirical observation, but is shaped by how we interpret what we see. The person who embodies rare emotional habits presents us with phenomena that our minds categorize differently, even if we cannot fully articulate why. There is a quality to their presence that transcends conventional markers of age, because they have aligned themselves with what Kant might call the moral law within, creating an outward harmony that we instinctively recognize as reflecting a deeper truth than mere chronological time. The rare emotional habits that contribute to a youthful appearance align with Kant's understanding of virtue as something that must be cultivated through practice rather than achieved through momentary effort. In his Metaphysics of Morals, Kant discusses how virtue requires an ongoing commitment to aligning our actions with moral principles, even when doing so contradicts our immediate inclinations. Those who appear younger have typically engaged in this virtuous practice with regard to their emotional responses, developing over time the habits of responding to life's challenges with equanimity rather than reactivity. This is not achieved overnight, but through thousands of small choices to respond according to principle rather than impulse. The cumulative effect of these choices becomes visible in their countenance and energy, creating what we perceive as youthfulness, but what is actually the outward manifestation of inner virtue. Kant would appreciate this connection between inner moral development and outer appearance, seeing in it a beautiful harmony between the sensible and supersensible aspects of human experience. The concept of dignity in Kant's philosophy provides another lens through which to understand the phenomenon of emotional habits and apparent youthfulness. Kant argued that human beings possess an inherent dignity that comes from our capacity for moral autonomy, our ability to govern ourselves according to principles that could serve as universal laws. This dignity is not contingent on external circumstances or others' approval, but is intrinsic to our nature as rational beings. Those who master rare emotional habits often exhibit a profound sense of their own dignity, responding to challenges not with desperate reactivity, but with a composed self-possession that reflects their understanding of their intrinsic worth. This inner sense of dignity manifests physically as what we might call grace, a quality of movement and presence that suggests inner resources independent of external validation. The face that has spent decades secure in its own dignity, neither collapsing in insecurity nor hardening in defensive pride, maintains an openness and receptivity that reads as youthfulness. What we're seeing is not the absence of aging, but the presence of dignity, a quality that transcends time because it connects to what Kant would call the timeless aspect of our nature. Kant's concept of the sublime also illuminates our understanding of those who master rare emotional habits. The sublime, for Kant, refers to experiences that overwhelm our senses and imagination while ultimately affirming the superiority of our rational faculties. When we encounter something sublime, like a vast mountain range or a powerful storm, we first feel our sensory limitations, but then experience a kind of exaltation in recognizing that our minds can conceive of these immensities, even if our senses cannot fully grasp them. Those who maintain youthful appearance through emotional mastery have typically developed a similar relationship with life's challenges. Rather than being overwhelmed by difficult emotions or circumstances, They recognize these as opportunities to affirm their rational capacity to respond according to principle rather than mere reactivity. This ability to find meaning in challenge rather than being diminished by it creates a certain lightness of being that manifests as youthful vitality. They embody what Kant would recognize as the dynamically sublime, the capacity to stand firm in the face of powerful forces rather than being overwhelmed by them. The relationship between emotional habits and apparent youth also connects to Kant's understanding of happiness, which he distinguished from pleasure or mere satisfaction of desires. True happiness, for Kant, is worthiness to be happy, which comes from aligning our will with moral law. Those who appear consistently youthful often embody this Kantian conception of happiness, finding fulfillment not in the satisfaction of every impulse, but in living according to principles that create harmony between their inner and outer experience. This worthiness to be happy manifests physically as a certain ease and lightness that we perceive as youthfulness. It is not that they do not experience the full range of human emotions, including difficult ones, but rather that they process these emotions differently, relating to them through the lens of principle, rather than being swept away by them. This creates a fundamental difference in how stress affects their physical being over time. While chronic stress accelerates aging in most people, those who approach challenges with Kantian equanimity experience less of the physiological wear and tear that contributes to visible aging. Their rare emotional habits create what we might call a virtuous cycle, where inner philosophical alignment promotes physical well-being, which in turn supports continued emotional mastery. Kant's conception of freedom provides perhaps the most profound insight into the connection between emotional habits and apparent youthfulness. For Kant, true freedom is not the absence of constraints or the ability to do whatever one desires. Rather, it is the capacity to act according to principles determined by our own reason, even when doing so requires overriding our immediate inclinations. Those who master rare emotional habits embody this Kantian freedom in how they respond to life's challenges. Instead of reacting automatically based on conditioning or immediate emotional impulses, they pause, consider, and choose their response based on principles they have determined to be worthy. This freedom from emotional reactivity creates a lightness of being that manifests physically in what we perceive as youthfulness. The face that has spent decades in states of chosen response rather than automatic reaction moves differently, holds tension differently, and ultimately ages differently. What we observe as youthfulness is actually the visible manifestation of inner freedom, of having escaped the tyranny of automatic emotional reactivity that Kant would recognize as a form of self-imposed immaturity. Kant's essay, What is Enlightenment?, famously begins with the declaration that enlightenment is man's emergence from his self-imposed immaturity, with immaturity defined as the inability to use one's understanding without guidance from another. This concept of maturity as intellectual and moral autonomy helps explain the paradox at the heart of our exploration, that those who appear more youthful often embody a more profound maturity. Their rare emotional habits reflect an emergence from the immaturity of reactive emotional patterns into the enlightened state of chosen response. They have developed the courage to use their own understanding in determining how to respond to life rather than being guided by automatic reactions or social conditioning. This Kantian maturity manifests physically as what we perceive as youthfulness, precisely because it liberates them from the unnecessary tension and stress that characterize most people's emotional lives. The lines that become etched in most faces over time are not merely the result of chronological age, but of thousands of instances of emotional immaturity, of reactions that would fail Kant's test of universalizability and autonomy. Those who appear younger have simply spent less of their life in states of unnecessary emotional contraction. If you've found value in understanding how Kant's philosophical principles illuminate the connection between emotional habits and apparent youthfulness, know that you're not alone on this journey of discovery. The path to mastering these concepts doesn't need to be isolating or confusing. I invite you to subscribe to this channel and become part of a community of individuals who, like you, seek clarity amidst the fragmented information about philosophy and its practical applications. By subscribing, you'll receive weekly reflections that transform seemingly inaccessible concepts into practical insights for your life. We're not merely studying philosophy here. We're learning to think with greater depth, to question with greater wisdom, and to live with greater purpose. Click the subscribe button now, not as an obligation, but as a gift to your own intellectual and emotional development. And if this content has brought some clarity to your understanding today, leave a like as a way of saying, "We're in this quest for true knowledge together." Remember, understanding Kant's insights into emotional mastery isn't just an academic exercise. It's a pathway to awakening to a more conscious and authentic existence, one that may very well manifest in the timeless quality that others perceive as youthful vitality. What we're exploring transcends conventional understandings of aging and appearance, touching on what Kant would call the intelligible character that underlies our empirical character. The intelligible character exists outside of time and causality, representing our true moral essence, while our empirical character is how we appear and act in the world of experience. Those who master rare emotional habits have achieved a greater harmony between their intelligible and empirical characters, allowing their timeless essence to shine more clearly through their physical appearance. This harmony creates what we perceive as youthfulness, though it is actually something far more profound. It is the visible manifestation of philosophical integration, of bringing our lived experience into alignment with universal principles. The rare emotional habits that contribute to this appearance are not techniques or strategies in the conventional sense, but rather expressions of a fundamentally different way of being in the world, one that Kant would recognize as reflecting the primacy of practical reason over mere reactivity. Kant's distinction between analytic and synthetic judgments also illuminates our understanding of this phenomenon. An analytic judgment is one where the predicate is contained within the subject, like "all bachelors are unmarried," while a synthetic judgment adds new information, like "some bachelors are happy." Our conventional understanding of aging often relies on analytic judgments. To age means to look older, by definition. But the existence of people who appear younger through emotional mastery challenges us to make new synthetic judgments about the relationship between chronological age, emotional habits, and physical appearance. These individuals embody a different possibility, suggesting that the connection between aging and appearance is not analytically necessary, but synthetically contingent on factors including our emotional relationship with existence. This insight liberates us from deterministic views of aging, opening up new possibilities for how we might experience the passage of time if we develop the rare emotional habits that align with Kant's vision of human freedom and dignity. The physical manifestation of these rare emotional habits connects to Kant's understanding of beauty as purposiveness without purpose, a harmony that suggests meaning without being reducible to utility. The person who appears youthful through emotional mastery presents us with this kind of beauty, an integration of inner and outer states that suggests profound meaning without being directed toward any specific end beyond itself. There is a certain grace to their movement and expression that reflects what Kant would recognize as the free play of understanding and imagination, a harmony that is its own justification. This quality transcends conventional attractiveness, speaking instead to a deeper aesthetic principle that we instinctively recognize even if we cannot fully articulate it. What we perceive as youthfulness is actually this aesthetic harmony, this visible manifestation of inner philosophical alignment with universal principles. It attracts us not merely because of cultural associations with youth, but because it suggests a way of being that resolves the tensions and contradictions that characterize most human experience. In his Critique of Judgment, Kant explores the concept of adherent beauty, beauty that depends on the concept of what an object should be, as opposed to free beauty, which exists independent of such concepts. The apparent youthfulness we observe in those who master rare emotional habits might be understood as a kind of adherent beauty, one that depends on our concept of what human presence at its best might embody, a harmony between inner principle and outer expression, between autonomy and graceful engagement with the world. This harmony creates what we perceive as youthfulness precisely because it aligns with our deepest intuitions about human flourishing, about what it means to fully realize our potential as beings capable of both reason and feeling. The rare emotional habits that contribute to this appearance are not merely psychological techniques, but expressions of philosophical alignment with what Kant would recognize as our highest nature, our capacity for moral autonomy and principled living in a world of sensory experience. The transformation that occurs through mastering these rare emotional habits is not merely superficial, but reflects what Kant might call a revolution in the mind, a fundamental shift in how we relate to our own existence. This revolution manifests physically over time, creating the phenomenon we observe as youthful appearance in those chronologically advanced in years. It is not that they have found some secret technique for manipulating appearances, but rather that they have aligned their being with principles that transcend the merely personal, creating a harmony between the universal and particular aspects of their existence. This alignment reduces the unnecessary tension and contraction that characterize most people's emotional responses, allowing for a lightness of being that we perceive as youthfulness. The face that has spent decades in states of chosen response rather than automatic reaction simply wears differently, holds energy differently, and ages differently as a result. What appears as a physical phenomenon is actually the outward manifestation of an inward philosophical orientation that Kant would recognize as reflecting the primacy of practical reason in human experience. As we conclude our exploration of how Kant's philosophy illuminates the connection between rare emotional habits and apparent youthfulness, we return to his vision of human dignity and autonomy. Those who master these habits embody Kant's highest vision of humanity, beings capable of determining our own principles and living in accordance with them despite the pull of impulse and inclination. Their apparent youthfulness is not a denial of time's passage, but a different way of experiencing it, one that aligns with Kant's insight that time itself is partly a construction of our minds rather than an entirely external reality. By developing emotional habits that reflect philosophical principles rather than mere reactivity, they create a different relationship with temporality itself, one that manifests physically in what we perceive as youthfulness, but is actually something far more profound. It is the visible expression of having achieved a measure of the freedom, dignity, and moral autonomy that Kant recognized as our highest potential. In their presence, we glimpse a possibility for our own existence, a way of being that transcends conventional understandings of aging and time, while remaining firmly grounded in the lived reality of human experience.